Hello and welcome to Writers and Books Visiting Author Series. This event is a partnership between Livonia Public Library and Writers and Books. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary arts center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings, workshops, and literary programming for people of all ages, all currently available online. Our theme for 2021 is Taking Care. We're celebrating different ways we can take care of ourselves and take care of others this year. You can check out our upcoming schedule at wab.org. Please say hello in the chat and let us know you're there. Feel free to submit questions through the Q&A function. Books are available through our bookstore, Ampersand Books. I'll put the links in the chat. We're so excited to have Joani Elliot with us today. First, we'll hear from her read, then she'll be in conversation with Lois Taubman. Lois Taubman is a published writer, writing coach, editor, and educator. She has degrees in psychology, education, law, and practiced in those fields. A former teaching artist at Writers and Books, Lois also served on the organization's board of directors. Joani Elliott grew up near the mountains of Salt Lake City with six sisters and two brothers. She has taught middle school English and later writing at Brigham Young University and the University of Maryland. She lives in Provo, Utah with her husband. Her humorous contemporary fiction debut, The Audacity of Sara Grayson, follows an insecure writer's journey of self-discovery as she struggles to fill the void left behind by her mother, a best-selling literary icon. Joani, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you all.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, and yeah, here we go.
Great. Thank you, Dan. This is just such a treat for me to be with you. And so hello to everybody in Rochester and Livonia. Hopefully I said that right. Is that right? I'm sure you'll correct me, I hope. Anyway, I'm coming to you from LA, actually. I'm here for an author event this weekend, but I do live just outside of Salt Lake City, about 40 miles south in Provo, Utah. And so anyway, it's a thrill for me to be with you. I was actually reading about writers and books, and your organization is incredible. Your mission to increase literacy and writing and everything literary with books. I just think your organization is incredible. And Livonia, I think you have 42 branches. So I've also, when I lived on the East Coast for 6 years and wrote this book, The Audacity of Sara Grayson, while I was living in Maryland. And so during that time, we had driven up to New York and up through upstate New York and in the Rochester area. And it is just beautiful. So now that I know about writers and books and your amazing library system, I think I'm ready to move there. So if there's a realtor there on with us, maybe you can start sending me some listings. So I think my husband's on here too. So I'll just let him know about my plans, and we'll see if we can get that in the works. But anyway, let me tell you just a little bit about my book to get started. So this is my debut novel right here. It's The Audacity of Sara Grayson. You can see her pictured here, which is basically me writing a book, I think. Let me tell you a little bit about this. The book centers around two questions. What happens when the world's greatest literary icon dies? Before she finishes the final book in her best-selling series. And what happens when she leaves that book in the hands of her unstable, neurotic daughter who swears she is not a real writer? So that person is Sara Grayson. She's 32 years old. And she is barely hanging on to life. Her husband just walked out on her with their Pro Double waffle maker, and she lives alone with her dog, Gatsby. She teaches English to freshman writers at the University of Maryland, but she really does not like her job. I loved my job there. She's not good at it. She doesn't like it. So she's actually trying a new gig writing greeting cards, which isn't going that well either. So she's really just barely hanging on to life when she finds out 3 weeks after her mother's death that it's her mother's dying wish that she finish this much anticipated final volume in that in her mother's best-selling series. So at first she dismisses it. She's like, there's no way I can do this. But one thing leads to another, and she boldly takes on this book. But stepping into her mother's shoes means stumbling into family secrets that she was never meant to find out. And so she also is facing an impossible deadline, a publisher who does not want her to write the book. So she's got a publisher who's trying to sabotage her every move. So she'll quit and they can hire somebody else to do it. And so I hope readers will enjoy following Sarah on this really kind of epic journey to try and fulfill her mother's dying wish. And so that's the setup, that's the premise of The Audacity of Sara Grayson. And so I'm going to read from chapter 3. And to set this up for you, this is the moment that Sarah is meeting with her attorney. So her mother has passed away. She's grieving that loss of her mother and trying to figure out what to do next with her life. And so she is in her attorney's office. This attorney is a family friend. He's the son of their mother's longtime attorney. And she doesn't know what she's there for. She's at the attorney thinking they've got something else to discuss about her mother's estate. Her sister was supposed to be there with her. She couldn't come. So she's there and she has no idea what's in store for her. So here we go. And the attorney's name is David. Sorry to keep you waiting. David rushed in. He really did look healthier. He still wore his hair too short and his glasses were never sized quite right, but he'd filled out rather nicely in the chest and arms. David looked around his office. Where's Anna Kath? That's her sister. Oh, Livy's sick. I'll fill her in. Maybe we should reschedule. Come on, David. It's fine. Let's move this along. Are you sure? Please. Well, okay. Let me just find the right file. He sat down on his desk and opened a drawer. While David flipped through a stack of folders, he casually asked, do you know much about a Meredith Lamb? She lives in the UK. Not really. Sarah studied another desk photo. David and his girlfriend Mia were sporting oversized backpacks. Mia looked radiant. David looked uncomfortable. Apparently, his girlfriend was from Vancouver, which is so far west it's practically outside of Canada, or at least like a second cousin once removed. David found the file he was looking for and placed it in front of him. Your mother left a small trust for Meredith Lamb and a dependent. Well, actually, the trust was established some years ago by my father, apparently separate from your mother's last will. The dependent is an adult now, and the trust included a college fund. Did she mention this to you or Anna Kath? Doesn't ring a bell, but Mom is very generous. No doubt. Maybe she's a relative. My father's parents are dead and buried in England. He has a sister there, but I've never heard of Meredith Lamb. Okay. David kept flipping pages in the same file. Sarah wondered what he was getting at. She already knew the estate was more like a labyrinth, and that the initial review of the will 2 weeks ago only covered the most pertinent aspects of the estate. In fact, it took a web of legal counsel, including multiple law firms, to support the complicated aspects of Cassandra Bond's small empire. I thought we needed to talk about the book. Your secretary made it sound like we couldn't do this over the phone. Is this about Mom's literary trustee? David cleared his throat and shuffled the papers. Well, yes, this is about her work, and it's better face-to-face. I just thought Anna Kath was coming too. I'm a 32-year-old woman, David. I don't need my big sister holding my hand. Of course. He took several nervous drinks from a lime green water bottle with a built-in filter. He stretched his neck to one side and then pulled at the collar of his crisp blue shirt. Yes, well, I'll get to the point. He cleared his throat again and wiped his palms on his thighs. Spit it out, David. Did my mom fund a trust in Zambia? If it's the girls' school, it's totally legit. Mom researches everything. Sarah still slipped from past to present when she talked about her mom. That familiar ache pressed against her stomach. David put his glasses on and took them off again, rubbing the bridge of his throat. No, this isn't about Zambia. He placed his hands on the desk and took a long, deep breath that felt kind of weird to observe, like maybe Sarah was interrupting something and should come back later. He must have learned that in hot yoga with Mia. He showed up really sweaty at Cassandra's after class once. You have to wonder about an attorney who has time for hot yoga. David was waiting for her now. Sarah, are you with me? Yeah, sorry, I'm here. She retied her ponytail and smoothed it out. She swore she was developing ADD lately. She returned David's attention, willing herself to face him, to make eye contact. Were David's glasses too big, or was his face too small? So, about book 5, David stopped fiddling with his glasses. He clasped his hands together, swallowed hard, and fixed his gaze firmly on Sarah. Um, your mom wants you to write book 5. Sarah laughed. David didn't. Sarah laughed again, more like a confused sputter. Then, with a quick gasp, the whole amusing absurdity of the joke settled in, and Sarah laughed fully and deeply. This was actually a very funny joke. Oh, David, you know the Graysons too well. You did get my attention though, with the whole hands clasped together and the scary attorney look, like I'm gonna find out my mother is broke. David laughed nervously. No, your mother isn't broke, but yes, she did choose you to write the book. That's when Sarah noticed David's sweaty brow and how he wasn't wiping it. Beads of sweat hung there, practically defying gravity, and David didn't budge. Sarah's stomach dropped to her toes, and disbelief washed over her entire body. David, you can't be serious. The book's already written. It has to be. Mom's a finisher, a closer. I heard Anna-Kath ask her about Ellery Dawson. That's the name of the book. I heard her ask about Ellery Dawson myself. Mom said it was taken care of. I heard it myself. David wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and adjusted his glasses. She was behind on the book. She was working on the outline last year. She was hoping for more time. Sarah's body froze, her eyes wide. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hardly think. David leaned forward, resting his arms in front of him. It's her dying wish. She asked me to wait 3 weeks after her death to tell you. There's a letter for you. He opened a file in front of him and handed Sarah a letter on yellow stationery, dotted with white daisies, all sunshiny and bright, like it should contain a birthday greeting instead of some horrifying last wish. Sarah's hand shook as she read her mother's words. My dearest Sarah, Audacity. 4 fabulous syllables. Remember, this was on our favorite words list, a word with superb meaning and long overlooked as a girl's name. So David has told you the news. Yes, the book is yours. This audacious request is my gift to you. I know what we talked about, but you were meant to tell stories too. You have words, my dear. Write them. Mum. Sarah pulled out her ponytail, threw her head back against the office chair, and pressed her hands against her forehead. The audacity. The audacity. Sarah wasn't exactly a model of emotional stability before she walked into this office. Now her brain felt like it was swelling out of her skull, and the grief clamped around her heart, bubbled out of her chest with a rising fury. She shot out of her seat. What the hell could she be thinking? Sarah walked to the window and turned around. She pointed her finger at him. This is impossible. First of all, there's no way Mom's publisher would even allow this ridiculous dying wish to go forward. Second, she must have been on drugs when she decided this, right? She was on heavy pain meds, David. She was drugged. Yeah, she was drugged, and she was crazy. Well, your mom had an authorship writer on her contract with Iris Books. In the event of your mother's untimely death, the writer stipulated that she had the right to choose the author to finish her series and that she would indicate her choice in her last will and testament, which she did, dated 6 months ago on November 15th. She was of sound mind. My mother made this choice in November? November? She wasn't even sick in November. Sarah was shouting now, her face flushed and hot. David rubbed the back of his neck and discreetly swallowed a few pills. Sarah gasped in understanding. She slumped back against the window, the letter clenched in her hand. Oh my gosh. She was sick, even then? How long did she know she had cancer, David? I didn't know she was sick then. She had the writer for years, but she never specified an author until last November. The publisher is legally bound to work with you. They're eagerly waiting to hear Cassandra's choice of author, and they are understandably anxious. Oh, you think? Sarah sat back in her chair. Her breathing was short and rapid, and she began to feel lightheaded. This could not be happening. Mom must have specified an alternate author besides me, right? I mean, she wouldn't pin the future of Ellery Dawson, the whole empire, entirely on me, right? David shook his head, avoiding eye contact. It's only you. He chewed on his bottom lip, searching for something comforting to say. I'm sorry, this is obviously overwhelming. Overwhelming. My mother sold 15 million copies of book 4. Those 15 million people are waiting for book 5. They cannot be waiting for me. Her voice had turned shaky and high pitched. She hardly recognized it. She covered her wet face in her hands again. David walked around the front of his desk and handed Sarah a box of tissues in a solid walnut holder with the firm's monogrammed initials. Sarah stared at the box with an inordinate amount of disgust. No wonder people hated attorneys. She started pulling tissues out of it by fistfuls in crazed, quick movements. She wiped her face, blew her nose, pulled out more tissues and stuffed them in her bag. She huffed and stood up. Thank you, David. I've got to get back to work now. She folded her mother's letter in half and then again and again and one more time until it resembled a stick of juicy fruit gum. She slipped it inside her work bag with a pile of tissues. Wait, said David. We have a lot to talk about, and I'm sure you have more questions. Could I get you something to drink? I have to go. She attempted to hold her chin high, to feign confidence. Sarah reached past David to gather another fistful of Kleenexes. She finally opened the walnut tissue holder and removed the entire tissue box, placing it securely under her arm like a clutch. I'll just be going now. She smoothed out her shirt and marched towards the door, her flip-flops making a squishing sound as she stomped away. Look, I know it's a shock. There will be many details to work out, but you have a great deal of support. Shock? Yes, support. It was getting hard to form complete sentences. Sarah turned back to face David. The lightheaded feeling was back. Uh, right, then. Radio. Isn't that what they say in Dad's country? I don't know. That was rhetorical, David. Sarah turned to leave. Oh, wait, take this file with you. It's about key stakeholders in the series. Let's talk about this in the morning, okay? I know this needs to settle in, but there are some things we've got to address. The publisher has been on my back since the funeral, and I have messages from your mother's LA firm regarding her contract with Sony Pictures. Your mother's agent also called, and Sarah couldn't hear anything else. She felt like she was viewing the world from inside a swimming pool. Everything was blurry and hard to hear. She just needed to get out, find a place to think. She found her car and quickly pulled out of the parking garage. She needed to see Anna Kath, to tell her the horrible thing. She passed the cemetery on her way out. She hit her brakes, pulled a U-turn. The wheels screeched as she turned hard and fast. She pulled up close to her mother's grave and marched over. Sarah snatched the daisies right out of the vase that she had left just an hour ago and pulled them out. She stomped back to her car. An onlooker nearby raised her eyebrows in disgust. Sarah looked right at her. You have no idea, she said, and drove away. So that is Sara Grayson.
Guess we're ready to start with the questions. First of all, Joani, it's so nice to meet you in person, so to speak.
Oh, it's nice to meet you, Lois.
And I want to start by saying that I stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning to finish reading your book. Not last night, fortunately, a few weeks ago. And I bet all aspiring writers want to be able to create a page turner like the Audacity of Sara Grayson. And we want to know what led you to be a writer.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you. That is the best compliment to know you stayed up late reading my book. So thank you. Well, I'll tell you that I actually never set out to be a writer. I became an English teacher because I loved reading. And so if you had told me that, so I'm turning 49 this summer, if you had told me that this was in my future, I would have been really surprised because writing was so challenging for me. But in graduate school, I took a creative writing class, a creative writing workshop, really just on a whim. It was because I loved the professor and I loved her writing. And that was when I first started doing some creative writing and found I was actually pretty good at it. And it was a lot more fun than all the papers that I would have to write in graduate school and the kind of things that I would be doing in that work. And so that's when things started flowing for me. But life got busy and I really didn't do much writing until um, much creative fiction writing until 2015. And that's when I was teaching at the University of Maryland. And I hit this point when I thought, if I keep teaching writing instead of writing, I am never going to fulfill this dream of becoming a writer and an author. And so I talked to my husband about it. I said, I think I need to step away from this for a couple of years. I thought I'll give myself 2 years to try and do this. It took longer than that. But I said, what do you think? And he was so supportive of it. He said, let's do this. Let's go for it. And so I did. And
Well, we're glad you did. How did you come up with the idea for this novel?
well, let me tell you this. So when I stepped away from that job, that first semester away, I was so excited to finally do this. And as I got started, I kept a big stack of student portfolios because as much as I loved teaching, I did not love all the intense grading that came along with it. And I thought, I'm going to have some tough days, and on those tough days, I'll look at that stack of portfolios. And let me preface, you had to you couldn't shred their papers. If they didn't come claim them, you couldn't, I had to keep them for a while till I shred them. So if you're wondering, why does she have all the student portfolios? Anyway, I thought I'll keep these for when it gets hard. I can look at those portfolios and think, would you rather be grading those? And so by the end of the first week, I looked at those portfolios. And I thought, yeah, I would. That's how bad it was going the first week. And anyway, the writing went from difficult to bad to worse to agonizing. I just had a rough time. I would start ideas, stop, restart, get going. And it was just, my writing was going terribly. And I thought, what have I done? I've left this job. And the tough thing is, I'll tell you when, and maybe you can relate to this, Lois, is writing yourself. For me anyway, when writing isn't going well, I get distracted. And so I started doing all the wrong things. I was organizing my kitchen pantries and cleaning out my closets. And I started wandering the aisles of the Container Store in my yoga pants and calling it research. So it really wasn't going well. And one day I was just crying in my bathroom, feeling sorry for myself. And I thought, well, at least nobody is waiting for my book. I had no agent or editor. And I hadn't even told a lot of people that I was writing a book because I didn't want them to say, hey, Joani, how's that book going? And so I thought, well, at least nobody's waiting for this. And I thought, what would it be like? What would it be like if a lot of people were waiting for this book? I wonder how that would feel. And I thought, what would it be like if thousands of people were waiting for this book? Or if you had this pressure to write a book where millions of people were waiting for you? And that's where I had this moment of seeing this sad sort of person who had the weight of the world on her shoulders, where she had to write this book under all this pressure where millions of people were waiting for her book. And that is the moment when I first pictured Sara Grayson. And I knew pretty quickly that her mother had left her the book, that she had writing in her soul, that she needed to write a story that she had to get out. And that she was just in this really difficult, pressurized situation. And after that, things started to come together for me. And it did require me to stop wandering the aisles of the Container Store. And I had to stop. My pantries are much less organized now, and everything's a bigger mess in my house, but I have a book and I'm writing the next one. So, but that's how the
That's
story
my
came out.
last question.
Yeah. But she was born in my bathroom. It was a home birth, and that's how she came about.
Well, thank you so much. What a great answer. What was the inspiration for the title of this book?
What's interesting is I don't remember exactly how I came up with the word audacity. Um, Honestly, but it was the very first title I came up with. And and then pages later, I mean, even at the very end, when I was starting to pitch this to editors and agents, um, I wrote pages of other alternative titles that I was asking family to rank and tell me what your favorite is. And it was interesting that after all that, we just came back to the Audacity of Sara Grayson. And I honestly don't remember where Audacity came from. Maybe because it just felt like she was doing such an audacious thing. And I do like that word. I mean, because it means something. I mean, it has a couple of different definitions with some different connotations, but I like the one about being bold and courageous and innovative. And that just speaks to me because I think it does take that kind of courage to write a book. Although I was talking to a former professor of mine, and he says, yeah, audacity is a good word, but tenacity might also be a really, really great word when it comes to publishing a book. So
That's true. Well, I'm glad you went with Audacity. I think it's attractive to people when they're looking at titles.
mm.
Every chapter begins with a quote about writing. They were so great. Do you have a favorite one of all of those
Mm.
quotes, or a favorite two?
know, I love so many of them, and I will tell you they were meaningful to me as I began this journey because I was taking this deep dive into the craft of writing like Sarah was, and so that's where I was collecting all the wisdom that I could for myself. One of them, it's right at the beginning of the book. Um, Joy Harjo, our national poet laureate, has one that says, I could hear my abandoned dreams making a racket in my soul.
Hmm.
And I just love that. It's so beautiful. It's actually from her, it's not from a poem of hers, it's from her memoir.
Hmm.
And I love that because it speaks to Sarah's journey at the beginning of the book. She has abandoned dreams that are making an absolute racket in her soul. And I realized that I had them too. I was living a happy life. I wasn't in total duress or anything, but I had dreams that were making a racket in my soul. I think that's what led me to leave my job and do this a big thing. And I loved my job. I cried when I left it. But I had something inside me that had to come out, and so that was important for me.
Yes, thank you. Um, what intrigues you the most about Sarah Grayson as a character?
Mm, I think her willingness to step up and write the book with all of the expectations and pressure around her. And so I think it is her own audacity that I love about her. It's her willingness to step up to that self-doubt. And I think, she and I have so many things that are different from each other. But maybe what I love is what I connect to in her is that courage to create. Because I faced so much self-doubt in myself. There were so many moments when I was writing this book that I think all of us in whatever our creative pursuits are, or just in anything that's difficult that we're trying to do, I think we all have to face that voice in the back of our heads that says, who are you to do this? Or who do you think you are? Can you really do this? Are you up to the challenge? And she has, at the beginning of the book, after she's left with such little faith in herself. And I've really thought about this, what it would take to step up and write this book with so many expectations. And so I love that courage in doing this. Um, and it's what I've needed to find inside myself to move forward. And I had this feeling as I was writing the book, sometimes I thought it'll be just enough to finish it, even if just my mom reads it or my husband. But I thought, no, you've got to finish it and you've got to get it out there. You have to, it will not just be enough to finish it. You've got to finish it and you have to be brave enough to get it out there. And I think for any of us who are trying to do our work and share it, oh, that's hard.
You need to be courageous.
Yes, and vulnerable.
And vulnerable. So tell us about your writing process. How does your own writing process compare to what Sara went through in writing the book, writing her book?
Well, I will say that for me, it has evolved. So my writing process used to be cleaning out my garage and going to the Container Store. For me, my writing process, I'm very disciplined about my writing process, and I've learned to protect my time and to treat it like I would a job. So I have specific hours that I show up for and that I'm disciplined about, and a space that is my writing space. And even a few rituals that I do right before I get started to help me know this is my creative space and my time to write. And that's been really important for me. And that was important for Sara. She had to learn how to do that as well.
Eventually.
Yeah. So she was not as disciplined as she needed to be. And so it is a discipline. And there, I recognize actually for a lot of writers, they have things that work well for them. And I think each writer has to find what works for them. But for me, my writing process, I write best in the mornings. Not too early, I will say. I'm not part of the 5 a.m. writers club, but writing first thing in the morning works for me in that creative space. And yeah, what did I get the other part of your question? Was it about Sara?
I want to ask you about outlines because
Sara
spends a lot of time writing outlines, and I know some writers believe in it and some don't. So how about you? What's your take on outlines?
No, there's a quote in the book that George R.R. Martin, the writer of Game of Thrones, the author of that, he also calls it architects or gardeners. And architects have the whole house planned out, and gardeners plant and grow. So I'm an architect. I do outline the whole story. And so for those of you who are listening, by outline, I don't mean like a Roman numeral and A, B, C, D. I do outline the whole story. So I write, like, go by chapter and write, this is what happens here. So it's in prose. I write, this is the story, this is what happens here. So I have the whole, for me, it's about a 50, 60 page story that I basically write. This is the story of the book. And then I actually workshop it with some family and friends to see if the story and the arc of the story works and makes sense. And so that works for me as an architect. But here's where I'm also a gardener, is that as I start actually writing the full book, new things happen. It's different as you start actually writing the story. Surprises happen because as I've grown things, the gardener part of it is that things pop up that I didn't expect. Different kinds of flowers and plants that I didn't expect, and characters surprise me. And because the actual writing of it, there's just things that go a different way than I expected. And so for the book I'm writing now, and for Sara Grayson, there are things at the end that changed, totally unexpected things. And so I'm impressed with those who write an outline and actually totally stick to it exactly how it is. I took a master class by James Patterson, and I actually don't even read a lot of James Patterson. His genre is quite different from mine, but he has a lot of good ideas. But he advises outlines so you don't write yourself into a corner. So you can, in terms of if you have a lot of pieces, and there is a bit of a mystery that runs through my book. And if you have things that you have to plant and you're just kind of going by the seat of your pants, you're going to have to do tons of rewriting, tons of reconstructing. So for things like that, you have to make sure you have things in the right order. So
sort of answered a question I was going to ask later, but I'll bring it up because of the planting part of it. So one of the things that really impressed me about your book is that you knew when to introduce subplots. I think that's extraordinary because I think it's very important that they're introduced not too early or not too late. But you planted seeds first. That was exactly what I was going to call it. You planted seeds. So when that subplot came in, it wasn't like, oh my God, where is this coming from? Oh yeah, that makes sense. So how did you know when to introduce subplots? How do you know how to do that?
So that's a great question. And I had to work hard on that and do a lot of revising, Lois, honestly. Um, and I would read other books and follow them and see what they did. And I also read books on craft about how to structure things, where about the time where certain things are introduced. And I would reread it again, and I think, okay, this is the arc of the story. Where do I need to have certain things placed so that it makes sense? And so I had to be real deliberate with that, actually. I'm amazed. I'm in awe of authors that don't have to think about it and that it actually just comes naturally. And there are a few things that it just come with the flow of the story, that this is about where this would come in. But I had to work at that and make sure that things were coming in spots that felt natural and good for the story. Yeah.
Not forced. It never seemed forced.
Oh,
And
good.
always seemed like, oh yeah, this is where it should come in. So bravo. That was
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
okay. So let's go back a little. You were talking about workshopping. So what are the pros and cons of writing groups?
Okay, that's a great question. So, um, well, I think the only con to me would be if you didn't have an effective writing group. so, so, so for our friends who are listening, I had a writing group that I used throughout the process of this novel, and I think it's probably the teacher and professor in me that extols the virtues of writing groups. When you have an effective writing group, they help so tremendously. And so I had a great writing group in Maryland where I wrote most of this book. And actually, I moved just maybe in the last year of writing this book, and we still just met online. And they saw my book through 2 drafts.
Mm.
And there's such a power in meeting with people to discuss your book, and in meeting with a group of people to discuss your book, where you're getting ideas generated together as a group. And that's opposed to just sending it off individually to different people where they just give you ideas in isolation.
Mhm.
So I learned so much more when we were together and they'd all read, say, 3 chapters, and they're talking about it together. That's a really powerful thing that happens, as opposed to just getting 3 separate critique points from the readers in isolation. So I'm a big proponent of writers groups. The other thing that it changed for me when I started working with that writers group, is that as I'm writing, I'm thinking of some of these people. I'm already writing for an audience, and that was really powerful for me as well. So on my website at joanielliot.com, I actually have a lot of resources for writers groups. And if you're thinking of joining a writing group, or if you want to assess the kind of writing group you have, and there's ideas for finding writing groups and helping your writers group to work more effectively, there are some of those resources there. But I'm a huge proponent, and I will tell you this: if there are any writers that are listening, if it does feel a little vulnerable sometimes to share your work, and I think you want to think, no, I'll just get by without it. I will tell you this: I can tell the difference in manuscripts that have had a good writing group, and those that don't. Those of you who are just having your friends and family read it, even if they're good readers, there's a difference. Your manuscript will be so much better, so much better. When I finally got signed on with an agent, it needed so much less work because of that writing group.
That's very helpful. There are a couple of things that you said. 1, 3 chapters. I think one of my fears about being in a writing group is, what if they read the whole book and they don't like it? But I think what you're saying is you give it to them in chunks.
Yeah, over a long period. I mean,
And
so I worked with them for a couple of years.
that's so helpful. And the other thing is that you picture them reading when you're writing. And I know Stephen King said his reader is his wife. He's writing for his wife. And I think you always have to, in fact, when Dan said I taught a writing workshop at Writers and Books, the very first question I would ask the first minute, who's your audience? And they would say, everybody. I'd say, no, not everybody. Think about for whom are you writing this book? So
Yeah.
thank you. That was so helpful. There's a lot of humor in your book, and that came across so strongly in the excerpt you read. Why is humor such an important part of your storytelling?
Oh, that's such a great question. I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately. And something I've been thinking about is the power that humor has to reveal truth. Because I honestly think that humor has a way of slicing through a difficult situation and reveal the absolute truth of what's going on. Because another thing about humor is that it's often the funniest when it's revealing truth. And when it's and the other part of it is when it's revealing truth, it can build connection. It can build connection in the scene, like the characters are connecting with each other in a really funny situation. And I also find that in some of my favorite funny books, it's building connection with the reader. You're reading this and you're thinking, this is funny. I'm connecting with this situation, with these characters. This is making me laugh. And I think one of my favorite, there's a lot of different types of humor, but I find a lot of humor in the vulnerable moments, the awkward humor, the humor when people are just being themselves and experiencing life. And that is, I think we're just all trying to get by in life. And so when we see people just being themselves and finding these moments of life where it's just tough and we're thinking, oh, that's me. That's me. Um, it's revealing truth, it's revealing vulnerability. And I think that builds connection with our readers. And I so that appeals to me.
Thank you. So there are a few questions which I forgot to look at from the listeners and watchers, but I think you've answered most of them, or if you haven't, the answers are on your website. But there's one question that I think is very important. What writing practice do you recommend for individuals who can't afford to leave their day jobs?
Well, I will say, believe that well, first of all, you need to be reading. And if you have a particular genre that you love, be reading in your genre. That's one of the most powerful things you can do as a writer is to be reading. And if you are a busy person and you don't have a lot of time to be reading, find where you can be listening to audiobooks. I just consider that's reading too. So when we talk about reading, it's not just this, it's listening. So download some audiobooks on Libby through the Livonia Public Library, and start, do it while you're brushing your teeth or getting ready in the morning or on your commute or when you're exercising. So make sure you're reading a lot, and then find some daily writing practice, even if it's just a little in the morning, a little at night, and believe in the power of small things accumulating, that compound effect. And if you're willing to just get a little bit of writing in every day, you'll start to see that cumulative effect, and you'll see it start to happen. And so if you're writers write, so find that small hour in your day that you can commit to that and see what happens with that. And if you do ever find time to find a writing group, at Writers and Books has incredible resources. So go to this website if you haven't already. I'm in awe of your writing resources. It's why I'm planning to buy a house there and move to there because of Writers and Books. Sure.
Well, thank you so much, Joani. And even if you don't decide to move here, I hope you decide to visit, because we would all love to spend some time with you. And I can't thank you enough. I think we're out of time. I think we went over.
Well, this has been such a delight to be with all of you. And anyway, thank you, Dan and Lois. And what a treat for me to be with you all this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was really wonderful. Thank you both for being here. This was great. I want to say buy her book. The link is in the chat. I also want to thank our funders. I'm just going to put a screen up here. Thank you to Livonia Public Library and Frank Sykes. I want to thank you all for coming, and have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.